Hello, welcome to another episode of Global Pause Rethink the Future. So in today's podcast, I'm going to talk about the holding pattern that I suppose we engender when we accept the way of life that we do. That's to be market orientated. And maybe just to look at the way how this potentializes a suspended animation. So the appearance of like movement, change, maybe we could say, and that doesn't, that kind of highlights the supplementary way that we receive ourselves. And so as a result of that, holding pattern, suspended animation through the supplement, if we're looking at what I advocate, the way of potentializing the supplement, it's really looking at the way how that we can approach life with risk, to risk life, because if we're orientated towards life, and yet what we presuppose that we're orientated towards can be the antithesis of it, and maybe we're having a presentment to that. Maybe, I mean, some of us, if we're looking at the authoritarianism that seems to be engendered on the face of this planet, and we're still beholden to kind of, potential nuclear annihilation, which people kind of tend to disregard and put out of mind. It's probably really important to kind of look at these things because, what we presuppose for ourselves might not necessarily be the case, and sow the seeds of a potential that is obviously contra to what we are really focused on or we really want for ourselves. So we're going to be covering off that. So I always talk about a holding pattern, the drudgery of making a living. You're a means towards the end. You're more likely to consume your dreams rather than realise them because, we are individualised. The pursuit of life, all right, is such that we are orientated towards the ideal of independence. So we're literally looking at the way how we can remove the claim that works on our lives in order to experience freedom. So that's why, money, the pursuit of money is a given, because the culture is to limit freedom through its convention and to legitimise the individualisation. So therefore the potential for life is circumscribed to an individual's and not to the way of life that is just not questioned in that orientation. And so as a result of that, you're securing your time as a supplement. And so any form of dynamism or creativity, if it doesn't potentialise obviously the way towards life, it creates essentially suspended animation. It gives the appearance of change and of movement, but it doesn't potentialise the way towards. It is never questioned, because especially when the reign of the independence as an ideal is never problematized as far as the vestiges of a transcendentalism that works through the aspiration. So the question here is that ultimately you become beholden to death. Now, why is that? Well, if your aspiration is the ideal of independence, so to remove the claim that works on you, and so therefore you're marginalising everything for the preeminent good of your time, then everybody's beholden to an unavowed utopianism because there's no market outside you for your time. So there's no place for that market outside you. So it's inherently utopian. And because you accept the world as a given, because you accept the ideal of independence as a given, you resolve upon that way of life in order to be orientated towards the pursuit of it. All right. So, but the question here is that if you accept the world as a given, then you're obviously not animating the full scope of your agency because you accept the world as a given. There's a certain part of it that you don't question. And if you don't question it, it's managed on your behalf. But once again, if you're not animating the full scope of your agency or your power, then the institutions that legitimize or substantiate that way of life is a way they collect that power. All right, but then they use that power to substantiate what you hold out as an ideal, which is the ideal of independence, but you're securing it against the they. So power here legitimises itself through always spruiking the fact of it's about your security. Now, but spruiking security can marginalise the life that you are orientated towards because it's presupposing that that's the ideal, because the independence from the claim, it's about securing it against. But so the question here is that it can legitimise any form of behaviour as such when it can justify it by always using security as a way of couching its means towards that goal, as it were. So the question here is that if you does that way of accepting life create the issue of removing all risk of ways towards that life that we presuppose? Because if our way of life is totalizing, okay, so it's about homogenizing, it's about individualizing, it's not about questioning the way towards, but it's about ensuring that you're in your channel, all right, that you're accepting what is given to you, unquestionably so, whereby that you accept the ideal and you accept everything in a way that what you're doing is that you're only resolving upon the possibilities that relates to your individual life and not giving due consideration to the aspirations that you have in light of in light of the way towards what you always presuppose. Well, then the totalizing aspect is such that what it happens is that it will see risk, not so much as risk as we can look at risk from the aspect of security, but risk from the aspect of a potential towards life that would actually make that power redundant. All right, so the issue here is that if you accept the scope of your agency and by doing that you legitimize power removed from yourself to manage the world on your behalf, all right, then it pays to preserve that way of life that preserves the niche of people that can manage the agency that you don't demonstrate, all right? But if you did, then what you're doing is you're potentialising a way of life that risks literally the entrenched position of people that feed off our way of life to sustain themselves and to basically be in a position to be authoritative, to tell people basically what to do and what to think. You know, to tell people what to do and what to think, because in that context you're just a consumer of life. So life is being managed for you. You don't have to worry about life because we've got this, we've got covered. See all the experts that we've assembled that actually know what they're doing. You're a fucking pleb. You're a fucking no one. You don't know what's good for you. We know what's good for you. All right, and so therefore we're going to manage that, or we're going to manage the risk on your behalf. But the case here is, what's the risk? The risk is not to you as such. It's to you by that power that realises that it can be surpassed. All right, so therefore, but if you've got the game is such that every single nation state, it does the same thing where they're basically the existential threat does not come from outside but comes from its very populace. And the people that feed off it, the people that arrogate to themselves basically expertise when it comes to what you presuppose towards life, well then really ultimately that's all that's just highlighting is that. Because the thing is that so you yourself, you as an individual, to question your life, and I always say it's just about you know, the first problem is the thought crime, is actually questioning our way of life in light of what we presuppose, that what we're orientated towards. And because if you do that, then and if you potentialize the question whereby you realise that there's a spiritual disease that you're beholden to, and that the unavowed utopianism could potentially engender a dystopian future, then really what you're looking at is that you're really implicating your actions in light of that potential, that possibility that can come to the fore. You know, and look at everything that's antithetical to what you presuppose that you're orientated towards as well. So if you look at, would you create weaponry? Would you create all these sadistic ways to kill people? Well, you wouldn't. because that's just completely the opposite to what you presuppose that you're orientated towards. You're orientated towards life, but yet what has happened when you don't animate the full scope of your creativity? The power that you don't animate is collective in an institution or in these centres that can utilise it in order to preserve their position, right, that they would claim to be unsurpassable. But it's only unsurpassable in light of the culture that we don't animate. This is the question, the culture of in light of the culture that we don't animate. And that's got to do with the light of the creativity or the agency or power that we don't animate. So when you're looking at a holding pattern for life, for what you presuppose when you're orientated towards the ideal of independence, the way how that you can look at your life and just to be a suspended animation with that nothing of substance, of resolving upon signs that are absolutely vacuousness and that have no substance or nothing kind of we could say real about them as such. They're real in reference to what they symbolise as far as the aspiration of differentiation, but the aspiration is the same. It's the independence. And so if you're looking at it from the aspect of the transcendental that works through your aspirations and that being removed from life, all right, because it's transcendent to the earth, and you're valuing the preeminent good of your time, and the preeminent good of your time is given to you as a supplement, a Sabbath, an afterlife, well then the vestiges of the seventh day of creation, you're temporalizing, you're immanentizing. And so if you're immanentizing the spirituality or the religiosity that you, even in your atheism, would deny, well, then it matters little. The eschaton is basically is here, is fully present. And what is it then? So the eschaton, if you're looking at the eschatology and you're looking at the study of the end times, the context here is that if you're beholden to an unavowed utopianism, okay, well, what does that mean? Well, history has ended, hasn't it? So it's just all managed on your behalf. Everything's managed. So whether or not you're looking at the way how you enframe the supplement of your time, what does the enframing mean? If you're looking at it from a Heideggerian kind of point of view, well, the way how that you're kind of ordering time as a supplement, and I always keep on saying, unavowed utopianism, there's no market. You're the market. So enframing the supplement of time is a way of orientating you in a way that you don't actually question the way of life, question the way how time is given to you. It's the way, it's what it is. It's not neutral. When time is economic good, it has the vestiges of a transcendentalism that runs through it, which is atemporal, and so therefore it's removed from life. It's not imminent. It's imminent in the sense of your aspirations, but it works in a transcendental kind of way that it's removed. So it's both transcendent and it's imminent, because we basically demonstrate that through our actions, and so therefore we immanentize it. And so as a result of that, we immanentize the end of history. Now, the end of history has got nothing to do with the movements of history and the grand narratives that go along with it. It's just the unavowed utopianism that we're beholden to, the individualization of the pursuit of the eternal Sabbath. So if you're looking at enframing the supplement through social media, through consuming yourself through visions or now through narratives, and then being beholden to narratives whereby what are you doing in your time, and if I look at it from the aspect of like the divide, if we're marginality means to say that you're creating a divide. Like I always say, a divided house cannot stand. Or what's the term? What's the saying? Yeah, a house divided against itself cannot stand. So the marginal way, the way how that you are a means towards the end is essentially kind of indicates that, because you are marginal in what you presuppose towards life, and through that marginality can create a potential division, can be compromised, can be played off through the political process that we're beholden to, that always frames squabbling over the eschaton, squabbling over the end of history as such. The good way of looking at this is that if you're looking at it from like that understanding of immanentizing the eschaton, as it were, which Eric Voegelin a conservative kind of thinker, I think was the one that used that framing of it. He frames it from the aspect of, irrespective of whether or not you're a revolutionary, so he looked at kind of Marxism, or you're looking at liberalism, he actually frames that movement in one and the same thing. All right, so why is that? Why would we kind of frame both liberalism and even Marxism that is meant to be diametrically opposed as such as being immortalizing the eschaton? Well, if you look at it from the aspect of communism, obviously you can see that there was about reading history, which is, reading history in light of supposedly some kind of progression, which is just like looking at kind of, the secularized version of redemptive history, or looking at Hegel's kind of phenomenology of spirit and then inverting it, as it were. But then looking at the vanguard of history being the proletariat, but it ultimately just ended up being, the party managed. It was all about managerialism in the end. Liberalism, in sense, in trying to engender a form of collectivism that was tenuous because, it already, through the advent of free market enterprise and capitalism as such, had kind of those social formations were starting to kind of, lose their gravity. And Marx, in his famous saying about that religion is the opiate for the people's, kind of disregarded the most important aspect that we're seeing now, that we have a spiritual disease because we've individualized life and we have a sense of meaninglessness. Because liberalism, and this is where liberalism is kind of has a lot to do with it, when you reduce human existence down into commercial activity, and that's what you're orientated towards. And we only have to see that now, where our relationality is defined by want. And so when Vogelin, if that's the way I would pronounce his name, terms, about immortalizing the eschaton, and how both these movements, as much as that they might be disparate, kind of share one and the same kind of genealogy, as it were. Well, we can understand it from the aspiration the aspiration that we have towards life, maybe the spiritual blight that we have created for ourselves when we have defined. What's the saying? This is the saying of the Bible is that men do not live by bread alone. It's a classic example of that's 2,000 years ago. It's a classic example of what's actually been put at play when you're looking at a way of life that impoverishes what it means to be human. So what impoverishes what it means to be human means to say that you're only as good as your want. But the issue here is that the immortalizing of the eschaton, as far as the individualization of it, is such that people don't even really recognize that that history has ended, if you're going to look at it like that, because then it's just about the management of what is presupposed as the supplement, the remainder, the eternal Sabbath. So the question here is what's the question for humans? So you either give power over to institutions, so still render unto Caesar, essentially, is what you're going to be doing. All right, and so he's going to manage the supplement on your behalf to the point of marginalising any possibility towards life that is not already given, okay? Or you potentialise the Sabbath or the supplement that you make of your time in the mean of your existence to insert dynamism within life. That's our options, because the thing is that if we're beholden to an unavowed utopianism, and as a result of that we're engendering a dystopian future, then think about what that means, because the dystopian future is contingent upon the unavowed utopianism that we can't see. The unavowed utopianism is looking at the way that we're marginal, at the way how we make ourselves marginal towards the end that we presuppose, the economic good of time, the way how that we create a supplement, the way that supplement and the preservation of self in the light of the uncertainty of the future enables basically power to usurp that to ends that are antithetical to what we presuppose. So in order to create a dynamism, you're not giving power the ability to usurp that for an end that is not what you want for your life and for other people's lives. All right, so that's the way I kind of frame it. I frame it like that. If we're looking at kind of choice, opportunity towards life, the models towards life, then I always come down to it, and you look at the political culture and look at what is never questioned in anything, our way of life. Just think about that. Think about it from the aspect of spiritual disease, about a way of life. Everything is this presupposed, so it's just about managing it. And then you'll just squabble on the way you manage it. All right, this is the thing. What does that mean when people are squabbling on the way of managing it? They're not looking at the way of life. If you change the way of life, it doesn't need to be managed in the way that they would presuppose. It's about creating a common surpassing by animating the goodwill that money conceals. It's about harnessing the full scope of agency. It's about potentialising your time beyond the economic good that you receive it as, to create to temporalise place for a common surpassing. I always keep on that. So I end with that. And why? Why is that important? Because if you're acknowledging that you play host to a spiritual disease, well, it's a spiritual disease is not individual. It's collective. I always say that you have to remove it collectively. You have to remove it with other people. And if you do that, then what you're doing is you're risking life for life. You are throwing, you're potentializing life in such a way whereby that you are going to create that line of flight from a holding pattern that presupposes suspended animation of the supplement. All right, and that is our choices, the way I always kind of frame it. It's whether or not there's enough people that are questioning their way of life, that maybe want to engage in a different way of looking at things, from just a nobody, and then to see, okay, maybe there's something now that we can explore, and then to frame a lot of the things that you just never question, in light of the authoritarianism that we can kind of see is becoming very prevalent, and that dystopian kind of future that we play host to, that we engender through that unavowed utopianism. All right, that's what we're doing. It's nothing else than we legitimise it through our own acts, through the supplement, through security being the measure of basically our existence. Security, that's it. And that just presupposes marginalising it to secure it. At what cost, though? Well, it's the cost of your life, invariably, the cost of the quality of life, and what it means to be human, what it means to be born. Until next time.